Okay, recording in progress. Welcome, everybody. Okay, thank you all for joining tonight. I'm very excited about this 6-week class we're going to do on this classic book called Pirkei Avot. We're using the Steinsaltz edition. I do want to say that this is a couple of introductory points about Tractate Avot. There's over 50 tractates in the Mishnah. Mishnah are the volumes of the oral Torah, of the laws, and then the commentary on that is called the Gemara. Together, it's called the Talmud. But out of the 50-something tractates of the Mishnah, the rest are all how you do Jewish, what you do, how you do Shabbos, how you do kosher, all the laws. It's what a Jew does. This book is how does a Jew think? Which is you have to think about that. That the sages were incredible legal transmitters of the law. And we have this one volume that gives you an insight to the way they live their lives, to their thoughts, their most oft repeated, saying. So it's pretty incredible. Why are we learning it now versus any other time of the year? So it is a custom. I think it goes back to the 9th century, to the era of the Geonim, was the post-Talmudic rabbinic leaders, that Jewish communities would study this tractate between Pesach and Shavuot. There are 6 chapters, one for each week. And it fits well with the time. We're in the process of getting ready. We're doing Sfira to Omer. We're counting the Omer, right? Why are we counting the Omer? We're told that it was a refinement process from when the Jews left as slaves from Egypt to get ready for the giving of the Torah. So every year that re-happens, and we're getting the Torah again. So we have to refine ourselves. This is one of the tools the rabbi says. It'd be a great idea to learn the ethical teachings of the sages to refine yourself, to not just do Jewish, but to think like a Jew. Okay. There's many editions. There's many commentaries. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of commentaries on Pirkei Avot. And you can imagine the one book that's the ethical teachings, the aphorisms of the sages, is going to have a lot of commentary. There's a quote from the Talmud in Bava Kama 30a that somebody who wants to become a chassid, should fulfill the words of Avot. Now, wait a second. You're thinking Hasidic movement. What we call Hasidim today only originated in the 17th century. The Talmud's written a couple hundred years before the Common Era, or the Mishnah, around that era. I think after the turn of the Common Era. So who are they talking about? So in general, a chassid of the Talmud is somebody that wants to go beyond the letter of the law. They don't just want to get by the basics. They want to live in an aspirational way, beyond the letter of the law. So there's many times you see that there's, a law, for example, one may not slander, insult, or curse one's fellow. That's a biblical sin. It's a biblical prohibition. But an ethic of that would be, like we're going to see today, don't just suffice at not cursing out people or slandering them or gossiping, but receive everybody in a pleasant way. That's not a law. That's an ethic. Another example would be lend materials, give charity, right? It's a mitzvah. It's a commandment. But we're going to go in the ethics of the fathers, of the sages. We're going to go beyond that. Let the poor be the members of your household. Don't just give them a donation, go away. Make them comfortable. They should always feel comfortable to come to your house for a meal. And that's, the whole thrust of this book is beyond the letter of the law. Okay. So with that in mind, one more, the way we're going to do this is a lot of material to cover every week. Now, I have good news for you that although the custom is for 6 weeks till Shavuot, I believe most Ashkenaz communities extended that to do it the whole summer. So you can review it. You can review it after the 6 weeks in a deeper way. There you go. That's the book. Okay. So moving along. So let's talk about history. We're going to encounter the sages from the beginning of the Second Temple era through the last sages of the Mishnah. Time-wise, trying to see when that would be, roughly between 391 for the Common Era to 188 of the Common Era. That's the era of these sages we're quoting. The way we're going to do it is like this. When you turn to page 5, we're going to read the not purple, the main part of the mission, the translation and the intro. And then I'm going to try my best to comment on who the sage, the historical, when that sage lived, a little bit about that sage, and maybe make sense more of what this teaching is. Because I will tell you, and for those that's learned this over many Shabbosim in yeshiva or in yeshul, is that Pirkei Avot without commentary sounds very random. It sounds like a lot of random. This guy said this, and this guy said that, and just like it's like okay, very nice, and a lot of them are commonsensical. That's the way when you learn something without commentary. When you learn with commentary, which is not just random, it's people that really thought about this and taught it. They explain everything is extremely precise. The order, the build up, who said what. So that will help us appreciate more. On top of that, it happens to be that the Rebbe would teach many times of his Farbrengens in the summer period, in the post Pesach. Farbrengens is when the Rebbe would teach in these mass gatherings on Shabbos or holidays on the weekday to teach Hasidic teachings or deeper Torah teachings. So a lot of times the Rebbe would actually most of the way it worked was he would take something in the Torah or in the Talmud or in the Pirkei Avot and ask questions on it, dissect it, and explain in a lot more depth. So we have that really a treasure trove. And I will tell you that the Steinsaltz edition is very good, I feel, for what we call in Hebrew pshat. Pshat means straightforward understanding. Pshat. Pei, shin, tes, or Peshat. Pshat. And as I was preparing for this, I realized I had many books on Pirkei Avot, and this is another edition, the Kehot edition. Very, very well done. Also, it does the next type of dot connecting. So I'll try to give a little taste of that also. One thing I'm surprised they didn't do in the Steinsaltz edition is they did not include the customary verse that we say before every Shabbos when we say one chapter in the 6 weeks. And so it's not in there. I don't know why, because it's very standard. It's in the Siddur. Because most Siddurim, I can get another Siddur. It's more Siddur maybe. Just open up in the Siddur to page in the blue Chabad Siddur or in whatever Siddur you have, wherever Mincha for Shabbat afternoon is. So in this case, it's on page 271 in the blue Siddur. Okay, so it says like this: all sages, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek l'olam haba. All of Israel has a portion in the world to come. World to come in this context means when Mashiach comes, in the final era of the Messianic redemption. As it says, as the verse says, your nation are all righteous. La'olam For eternity, forever, Yushu Oretz, they will inherit the land. Netzer Mata'oi Masyad Lispar. Israel is the branch of my planting, says God, my handiwork that I take pride in. So this is a custom that we say before every Shabbos when you say the chapter. It's not in the Mishnah. This is actually a teaching from the Talmud Sanhedrin. Why do we say it? So there's many different opinions of why. But one thing is very simple is, as I said, this book is to teach you how to be a chassid, someone, a Jew who thinks, feels, and goes beyond basics, tries to live to the spirit of the law, beyond the letter of the law. You might think, well, okay, that's great for, rabbis or, big righteous leaders, but the simple rank and file, maybe I'm not worthy. Everybody can do this. This book is for everybody. No one should think that they're second class. Every Jew has a portion of the world to come. And I was actually, although it's not in the Steinsaltz edition, I was listening to a class by Steinsaltz. It's saying that you have a portion in the world to come. What's the world to come? It's you and your idealized self. So it's there, it exists already. What are you doing in your imperfect lives? We're trying to manifest that, trying to align with that. So it's telling you, you have this portion. You have an idealized in the world to come version of yourself. Everything here, you're going to be perfect at one day. Okay, now you just got to do the work to do it now. So again, it opens up that this is for everybody. This is not just for the advanced track Jews, so to speak, if there is such a thing. Okay, let's go to page 5, Mishnah 1. This Mishnah serves as introduction to the entire tractate. It underscores the complex relationship between tradition and innovation. On the one hand, the entire Torah is transmitted through tradition. On the other hand, sages in every generation discover and introduce matters of Torah in accordance with their own approach, with the deductive rules of Talmudic query and study. And you're going to see in a moment why this seems to be an out-of-place Mishnah, but let's read it. Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe, our teacher, received everything that can be categorized as Torah, not just 5 books of Moses, but everything in the oral study, and down to the ethics, not just the law, the law stuff, but even the ethics we're going to talk about is also coming from Moshe. That's why we're starting with this. And all comes from Sinai. Sinai means from God at Sinai. And Moshe was there for the 40 days and nights for the 40 days after Shavuot. Page 6. And this Torah again, you're going to learn a lot of things. We're going to go pretty quickly. Feel free to ask a question. When we say learn Torah, we don't mean just learn the biblical portion. It's an umbrella term for everything that is an outgrowth of the biblical verses. Oral Torah, commentary on the Torah, ethics that come from the Torah. It's all rooted in teachings, back to verses, back to Moses Sinai. And this Torah that Moshe received, he transmitted to Joshua, his primary disciple, who's chosen as his replacement and successor. Joshua was the first to receive the oral Torah in the chain of transmission. In case you want to know, when Moshe was the leader, 1313 before the Common Era, through 1273 before the Common Era. That's when Moshe passed away. Who took over from 1273 to 1245? Joshua. Yeshua then transmitted to the Zakanim, to the elders. And the elders, there's different opinions of who the elders. Some say it's the elders that lived after Joshua till the Jews settled the land. Some say it includes a very long era of the Shoftim, which is the judges that came after Joshua and the elders.
So Joshua was from 1273 to when?
1245 BC. And then the era of the elders, which we're going to say for simplicity's sake includes even the shoftim, the judges, like Samson, Shimshon was a judge, and so on. They led between 1245 till 931 before the Common Era. Okay, and those elders transmitted to the era of the prophets. The prophets led from 931 to 313,
Is it in here?
which ends, with Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and then the prophets who came back to rebuild the second temple, Ezra, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Okay, so that's 931 to 313 BC.
931 or 941?
931 to 313 BC. And then this is what's most relevant, is the later prophets transmitted to the members of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Hagadol, who were the colleagues of the prophets. For example, Mordechai, I believe, was part of the Anshe Knesset Hagadol. I think I'm correct. And Mordechai from the Purim story, because he actually came back after the Purim story with the Ezra to rebuild the second temple, where they established the men of the Great Assembly, who was kind of the high court.
Oh, after Purim they did that?
After, yeah, because they only got to rebuild. I'm not sure. I don't know exact history, because they actually went back before the Purim story. There was Jews that went back to Israel because they got permission from King Cyrus to rebuild the temple, but then the Samaritans tried to thwart it, so it stopped. And then the Purim story happened, and then after Achashverosh died, some say Esther's and his son King Darius II gave them permission to build a second temple. So something in that era. Okay.
Esther was
Darius II.
there.
Darius II. There's Darius I, Darius II.
He was the one who allowed it to
I
continue.
think yes.
That's
Okay. Here's what I learned. Obviously, I had to sift through a lot of information, but the Anshe Knesset Agdola was an assembly. I think it was 120 members at a time. We don't know most of the names of the people, which some say is because it was constantly changing by every assembly. They were a very important group, and we're going to quote some of their sayings because of them, we have Judaism today. They made some very important institutions like the prayer book. That's from them. Blessings, to make standardized blessings. That's all from them. And other things that we very much benefit from. Kiddush, Havdalah was from them as well. In other words, they created a portable Judaism in case of another destruction that happened 500 years later, roughly 400 something years later. We have a standardized Judaism, because in the Babylonian exile, it almost got lost. So many Jews assimilated in Persia. It was close to assimilation. And most of them didn't want to go back to Israel, but they made a lot of standardized Judaism that we know today. Okay. Another thing, this really, really blew me away. If you had to rebuild Judaism from scratch, how would you do it? Let's say you're the last Jew in a country, and you have to rebuild the Jewish community of, Syria or wherever, somewhere far out. How would you rebuild it? Well, that's what they had to do. They had to literally rebuild Judaism. They had to rebuild Judaism in the temple, even, and for the future. So, one of the things actually the Rebbe teaches, and I found this mind-boggling, that you think about it, most of this book is teachings. Why are we having a history lesson now? I just a little Talmud spoiler. Not every Talmud thing or Mishnah starts with the history of how we got there. Why is there a history lesson now? So one of the simple reasons is tell you that don't think that just the legal part of Judaism is from God at Sinai. Even the ethical teachings are from God at Sinai. That's one reason it's given. The Rebbe goes deeper, and he actually takes each of these 5 phases of leaders as the values and qualities that you need, that a true student of Torah needs to do our mission in this world, to make the world a holier place. Moshe, we know, represents humility. It says there's no one as humble as Moshe on the face of the earth, the verse says. Humility. Joshua, why was Joshua the successor? Why wasn't Moshe's sons the successor? Because Joshua was the most devoted disciple by far. So devotion to the Torah, devotion to God, and I would say, Virginia, you can also you can if you want a pencil to say if you want to do write in a book, it might be because we're going to circle devotion. So humility, devotion. The Zakanim are the elders. Now, a Zakin elder is also a euphemism for a scholar. It's an amalgam of Zeh Shekana Chachma, the one who acquires wisdom. Meaning, you can't just be humble and devoted. You have to internalize the teachings. You have to have a keen mind that assimilates the knowledge into your own self. Then you have the Nevi'im, prophets. Prophet, by the way, wasn't the guy who was like a random dude who just like God spoke to him. These were like lifelong scholars and saintly people. And some of them prepared themselves to get a divine inspiration. But they were scholars. The thing is, they were divinely inspired scholars. So we always have to know we can't just be the smartest kid in the room, the smartest guy in the room. We have to have a certain reverence for God. It's not just about smarts and wits and gymnastics. What? It's about reverence for Hashem, for God, like the prophet said. And the final one is Anshe Knesset Hagdola. As I said, they rebuilt Judaism after exile. It's saying that you should know that you don't have to be in an ideal situation in order to transmit Judaism. They were not in an ideal situation. They were after the first exile. It was brutal. We lost so many Jews in that exile. And yet, even in the concealment of exile, they're able to rebuild with all those stages. So just to summarize the 5 stages that a person needs to be a chassid or to be a Jewish warrior, so to speak, for good. Moses teaches us humility, followed by Joshua's devotion. Elders, the internalization of the teachings. The prophets, spiritual awareness, of God. And the Great Assembly, practical application. Everything ultimately has got to be applied. And don't say it's too dark to apply it. You could apply it. Okay, I found that amazing. So let's.
How do the Knesset Hagdola compare? How does that compare to Sanhedrin?
The Sanhedrin was, whenever there was the temple stood, there was a 71 body. I think the Sanhedrin would be part of the Sanhedrin, part of this Great Assembly, but they weren't. Yeah, it was a unique era of sages of rebuilding. Okay. Moving along. And maybe there was more than just the people in the Sanhedrin was career Supreme Court justices. Right? Maybe it was, I'm guessing it was more than just the Supreme Court justices that were part of this men of the Great Assembly. Just to show you, this is what I appreciate using a few versions of the commentary. I have to go much quicker after this. There's a teaching in the Gemara that why were they called the men of the Great Assembly? It's a bit presumptuous, So it says because they return the glory of God, of God's crown, back to the days of Moses. Who Moses, we see in the Torah, refers to God by three terms, 3 adjectives. God the Great, Hagadol, Hagibor, the strong, Vahanora, the awesome. And those are considered very, Moshe is very specific with his words. Those are the 3, appellations, not the word, it's appellations for God that we use. But when Jeremiah, who lived through the destruction of the first temple, and he saw the Babylonians dancing on the ruins of the temple, he said, foreigners are reveling in his palace. Where's God's awesomeness? So he stopped referring to God as awesome.
Who's that?
Jeremiah, prophet, who lived in the
Yeah.
through the destruction of the first temple. Daniel Hanavi, Daniel the prophet, who was taken to Babylon, became an advisor to the king. He said foreigners are enslaving his children. He was enslaved with Jews. Where's God's Hagibor? Where's God's strength? So he dropped the term strong to God. But the men of the Great Assembly, they said, we object. We object. To the contrary, God's proof of God's strength and awesomeness is proved more in the exile, because it's impossible, and it has not happened yet in other peoples being conquered, that we could be persecuted and enslaved in foreign country and foreign people and still survive. That's a greater proof of God's strength and awesomeness. I mean, not that God can keep things prim and rosy in a temple, but even in destruction, God can keep the Jewish project going. God is awesome and great and strong. So they referred back to God with those terms. That's why they're called the great, because they made God great again. I mean, not too. Yeah, that wasn't. I just popped out. Okay, meaning they could see God's face even in persecution and exile and despair. And this is a big lesson to us that, it's not the worst time in history to be a Jew, but it could be dark at times, and we have no excuse. It's been done before, and we can do it again. Okay. What did they say? What were their ethical teachings? So they, the members of the Great Assembly, said three matters. One, be deliberate in judgment. After all, they're judges, so the judges must precisely analyze every case that comes before them, even if they think they've heard it 100 times. Don't say, "Oh yeah, case file 49, kosher, not kosher, guilty, not guilty." Take every case from scratch very seriously. They also said establish many students in order to create a broad foundation of Torah study and Torah instruction. And they said the last thing, establish a fence for the Torah. These are the ordinances and fences, the rabbinic fences, right? Rabbinic law that is enacted to distance individuals in society from transgressing or trampling over the biblical commandments, the mitzvot. Okay, let's just do a quick analysis. I said who they were. So we did history of them. Why'd they say these three teachings? So if you look in commentary on page 7 in the Steinsaltz, on the bottom right column, be deliberate in judgment. Most comments explain the references to issue halachic rulings. But some say that actually they're saying here din could be more general. Din can be a term for deduction. When you learn Talmudic reasoning and deduction, they have rules of extrapolation and or analysis. Be very, very methodical. Meaning, as they're trying to expand Judaism, in the sense of not making a new Judaism, but expanding the tenets and the safeguards for it, don't do it haphazardly. Be very, very deliberate of what you add and what you do and how you analyze it. Because this is the great era. This is the era of ultimately the Mishnah, where the Judaism really thrived because of the explosion of oral study, of oral Torah study.
What is the three?
So what's it? 7?
No, what is the three?
3 sayings?
Yeah.
Look at the top. It's in the top. It's in the top.
Be deliberate.
Be deliberate in judgment. That's 1.
Establish many students.
Number 2, establish many students.
Deliberate judgment.
Be deliberate. Be very, careful and patient. Establish many students. Make a fence. Again, they're trying to rebuild Judaism. Take a lot of students. Don't just have 5 elite students. Have a very broad, even the middle, the B+ students. Have them in the room. Everybody's make a broad coalition of students.
What does make a fence mean?
Make a fence is an example of where the rabbis would add a safeguard. So what's an example?
Oh,
Like
kosher.
for kosher, right? So like
Yeah.
the chicken and milk, is an example, right? Didn't say you can't have chicken and milk. It's a safeguard not to have milk and meat. Okay. Um, and the fences are also a very important part because you have to remember a lot of Jews were illiterate for a lot of history. There's no books, no printing press.
It's all verbal.
Very verbal. How do you keep a uniform religion for people and many people that ended up being, ultimately exiled? These are their some of their brilliance is can be whittled down to these three things: expand with caution, make a lot of students. Torah studies should be very pervasive. It shouldn't just be the rabbi, one rabbi for 10,000 people. Have 1,000 rabbis, 1,000 scholars. Everybody should be a minor scholar. And number three is make a fence for the Torah. Make these fences. Every generation has its own challenges, and new threats to continuity come up. You can add customs or fences as is needed, obviously with caution and knowing that it's not essential. It's a safeguard. It's not biblical, it's rabbinic.
A lot of information here.
Yes, a lot of information. Okay, moving along. Next, the Mishnah continues on page 8 with the transmission to the last member, the last famous member of the Great Assembly. Shimon HaTzadik was among the remnants of the Great Assembly, one of the last of his sages, and he continued the transmission of the Torah. Who was Shimon HaTzadik? So if you look on the bottom of page 9, it tells you a little bit personalities in the Steinsaltz. He was a high priest also. He lived in the 4th century BCE, and he actually oversaw a smooth transition between the Persian rulers of Israel, because the Babylonians lost to the Persians, and then the Persians lost to the Greeks, to Alexander the Great. It's actually related in the Talmud, a famous story that when Alexander came through Israel, he came to Jerusalem. The Samaritans, who were enemies of the Jews, said the Jews are trying to plot and get whatever, they're plotting against the Greeks. So Alexander went to meet the leader, who was Shimon HaTzadik, and when he met him, Alexander got off his horse. Shimon HaTzadik wore the priestly vestments. You don't actually wear every day, but to honor the king, he wore the priestly vestments of the high priest. He came out. Shimon HaTzadik, Alexander the Great, got off his horse and bowed down in front of him. He saw him. He said, "What are you doing? He's bowing to you." He says, "Every night before I go to battle, a vision of this man comes to me and tells me if I'll be successful in each battle."
Wow.
Okay. He said, what did he say? He would regularly say a fundamental principle that he would repeat. So these sayings they probably said a lot of things, but these are the ones they said the most, I guess. On the basis of three matters, the world exists. The world stands on three pillars, proverbial pillars. That's how the world exists. And they are on the basis of the Torah, ala Torah, meaning studying, knowing, and engaging in the Torah, al ha'avoda, on the basis of worship of God through the temple service, and on the basis of acts of kindness, gemilut chasadim. Al ha'Torah, the world exists because there's Torah study, al ha'avoda, because there is temple service, and ultimately its replacement through prayer service, and on the basis of acts of kindness. So let's unpack these things. He's telling you here the purpose of the world. Well, he's implying the purpose of the world. We know in the Tanya, what's the purpose of the world? Dira b'tachtonim. God made this whole enterprise because God wanted a dwelling in the lowest realm where he's hidden, and we find him. And we invite God in through our actions and our study. How do you do that? Here's how you do it. This is actually not in the Steinsaltz, I'm going to say it. So one is Torah study. Actually, let's do the Steinsaltz, and I'll give you the dot connecting. So when we say Torah study, we mean the study of Torah for the sake of studying Torah, not the study of Torah to know as a manual of how to light the menorah, how to light the Shabbos candles. That's Torah as a manual of how to do mitzvahs. But there's a value of the study of the Torah, even for the parts you're never going to do. Maybe, like, say, example, things you can't do outside the temple. Right. So, but the study of it, that it's a value that we study Torah, just to study Torah, that is one of the fundamental principles, the pillars of the world's. We say, what do you mean the world exists in it? That the purpose of the world can come to place. Because what's the purpose of the world? As I told you, as a spoiler alert, is God wants a dwelling to be invited into this lowly at times and hidden world. How do we do that? Well, you study Torah. You're studying divine wisdom. You're inviting God into your mind. You're refining yourself that way. You can't just do, and you ultimately we have to do good, even if we don't know much. But you can't refine yourself if you don't refine your mind. So the study of Torah for the sake of studying Torah is a way we invite God into the world. Hence, it's one of the pillars of the world's purpose of existence. Number two is the basis of service. So this is back then in the temple meant the offerings, the sacrifices, which was really represented taking the four strata. We spoke about this in Shul once, the four strata of the kingdoms, right? We have mineral, we have vegetative, we have animal kingdom, and then a human being, the fourth strata of existence, all together bring offerings to God in the temple. It was this kind of sublimation of all parts of existence. That's what an offering was. It took a person, a Kohen, who took either an animal or sometimes it was a flour or oil offering, and there was always salt, mineral, all representative parts of the strata of existence being elevated to a higher state. So we do that also in prayer. Prayer is about a human being approaching God. We're trying to stand on our tippy toes to get a little closer to God in prayer. So that's another way that we have the purpose of the world is possible through this pillar of striving through prayer, through service to God. And number three is deeds of kindness. Gemilut chasadim is not limited to charity. Actually, baking a cake for your neighbor who's not poor is also gemilut chasadim. Taking care of the sick, not just the poor, is also in acts of kindness. Another pillar of the world can realize its purpose of being a holy dwelling for God is through people giving and taking goodness and kindness to each other. This is really cool. So the Rebbe says this is so the purpose of the world is. I was dreaming of a mural in the front of Chabad up there. These three pillars. Torah, because that's the way we refine ourselves. We refine ourselves through serving and worshiping God. Torahs bring God's wisdom into us. Service of prayer is we're trying to reach for the stars. We're reaching to God. It's another thrust, and the lateral give and take between people's kindness. That's how we make the world not just a holy place but a kind place. This is in contradistinction to the three cardinal sins that a Jew typically does not have to have martyrdom for anything in the Torah, except for the three cardinal sins of adultery, idolatry, and murder. That if somebody says, kill this person or I will kill you, you're not allowed to do that. If someone says, commit adultery or I'll kill you, you're not allowed to do that. If someone says, bow to this idol or I'll kill you, a Jew has to give their life. Sounds kind of harsh. But now that we unpack the purpose of the world is the three pillars of Torah, Avoda, of Milat Chasad, and we said there are different thrusts of perfecting the world. These are the dark opposites. Adultery is the exact opposite of refining. Torah refines you, right? Adultery is letting yourself become animalistic to your lust, your urges. So it's an extreme opposite of Torah. It destroys the pillar of the world. Idolatry is the opposite of worshiping God, of the one God, and murder is the epitome of the opposite of being kind to someone else. It's totally disrespecting someone to the point of taking their life. And therefore, the Torah says these three things you have to have. You can't, under no circumstances, because this would destroy the purpose of the world if you would allow those three extreme antitheses to happen. As an example, in the generation of the flood of Noah, they did all these three things. That's why that world collapsed. So the Rebbe really dot connects a lot of things very quickly. Okay, moving along to page 12. He would regularly say as well, I'm sorry, page 11, I'm sorry. Next, following Shimon, the next his successor, Antigonos of Sopho, which is a Greek name, was the leader of the generation. So Rabbi Steinsaltz in Personality says that it's a very common Greek name. It's funny for the chief rabbi to have a very common Greek name. So it's possible that Greek influence was very prevalent in his days. As well, it's possible that he was named after Antigonos Monophthalmus, a prominent general who succeeded Alexander the Great, because we know when Alexander took over Jerusalem, he wanted to put an idol or a statue of himself in the temple. And they says, it's not really allowed to Judaism, we'll do something better for you. We'll name all our babies born that year Alexander. So it's possible that maybe Antigonos was also named after his successor, who was a Greek general. So I never heard that. We'll see this is more relevant later. Actually, it's relevant now. Antigonos in the Talmud tells us a story about Antigonos he had many students. He was the chief, the Nasi. Nasi means the head of the Sanhedrin and the primary justice, the teacher, leader, the spiritual and and also Supreme Court justice. He had two students called Tzadok and Baisos, and they understood from the teachings that they're very, very smart students, and they understood that it's actually in the personalities, it says in the second column, that they learned that a person does not receive reward for his good deeds. So like, the heck with this. So they started their own movements called the Tzedokim, the Sadducees. They denied the oral Torah, which there were people even earlier that denied the oral Torah, but they made a movement out of it. They said, we believe in the verses from Moses on, everything else the rabbis making it up, and we're going to do our own stuff. Or they said, we're going to be more literalist to the verses, although they also made up their own adaptations. But their message was the rabbis are adding their own stuff. We're going to be purists. And they were, for generations, hundreds of years, enemies of the Pharisees, who were the rabbis of the oral law. And they, again, because what made them like their first, I guess, their grievance with their teachers saying, their understanding of Judaism, there's no reward for anything in this world, they became hedonists. They're into luxury. The Sadducees were a lot of them were the rich Jews, because that was very important to them. Okay. So what did he say? With that backdrop of the story, you're going to understand why he's saying this statement. He would say, don't be like servants when you do Judaism. Don't be like a servant who serves the master in order to receive a portion, right? Like a servant who's working to get food and board. Rather, be like servants who serve the master, not in order to receive a portion. In other words, that he had to underscore that Judaism is not about reward, but it's to do the mitzvot as for their own sake, because it's for God, it's for the betterment of the world, but not, you don't do it as even a spiritual self-serving practice. Because he saw, his students who broke off were all about reward, so don't do that. Okay. That's why he's now going to say another thing, Vihi Morash Shemaim Aleichem. Although you're not worshiping God in order to receive reward, you're doing it for altruistic reasons, don't forget that you're servants of God and let the fear of God be upon you. Meaning, this is very interesting. His students, because they didn't have, it was about themselves, it wasn't about God, they splintered off. She's like, don't just be the smartest kid in the room, make sure you're very reverent of a higher power. You're doing, you have that humility. In the bottom, also the Steinsaltz, in the last note of page 12, it says, well, ostensibly, someone who doesn't do reward, what's he doing? Why, if you're not doing, why are you doing it? Altruism? Maybe because you love it, you love God. But he says love alone, we learned in Tanya in the past few days, that love is very important. To develop a love, a feeling for God and Judaism, and love of this lifestyle. But that can't be your primary basis. The primary is reverence, humility, service. That's your first. Hineni, here I am. Okay, moving along. Mishnah 4. Following Shimon Tzadik and Antigonus of Socho, Nisha proceeds to the next stage of transmission of the Torah, 5 generations of pairs. So in the background, the pairs, basically the next bunch of generations, there was a Nasi, the leader of the court, and there was a deputy leader, deputy Nasi. Okay. Also, you'll note, just they're not called rabbi, just called Yosef ben Yezer, just like, because they were so prominent, they didn't need a title. Later on, you need a title. Okay, Yosef ben Yezer. Also, that you note the time these guys lived during the era of Antiochus of the Hanukkah story. Yosef ben Yezer of Tzereda and Yosef ben Yocham of Jerusalem, they received from them. What Yosef ben Yezer, who by the way was unfortunately killed by his nephew, who was a Hellenist, who sided with the Greeks. Yosef ben Yezer said, let your house be a meeting place for the sages who influence the atmosphere in your home and sit in the dust of their feet, meaning even sit before them on the ground. The students would sit before their teacher and accept their authority, and thirstily imbibe, drink their words, and desire what they want to say. So, just a note on that. This is the first time in Jewish history that one individual led the nation. Furthermore, this was the first generation in which a difference of opinion was not resolved. So therefore, meaning once you get to pairs, it's not as unilateral, right? So till then it was one leader. Now it's twos, which was also reflective of different opinions. So he says, go learn from a lot of teachers so you'll know what to do. You can't just, there's a proliferation of knowledge and learning. Go learn from all the scholars.
So you can incorporate.
To incorporate, right.
Yeah.
Learn this from this one.
Makes sense.
And if you have a lot of sages together, then they're going to work it out and come to a conclusion. And don't think that if you're not a scholar, like, okay, I'm the rich guy in town, I have a big house, the scholars come in the house. Even if you're not a scholar, just being in their presence, you're going to pick up stuff. You're going to learn from their ways. You're going to find humility and good things. Okay, next, Mishnah 5. Following the statement of Yosef ben Yezer, which says you should open your house to the sages and thirsting after their words, which, by the way, in our day, I mean, your house should host a Torah class in your house, host a Jewish event in your house. That would be a modern day example of doing this. It's good for your house. It's good for you. It's good for your family. It's good for your dog. I don't know. It's like everybody gets elevated by hosting a Torah or a Jew. Yeah. Yosef ben Yochanan emphasized the need to open one's house and the heart to other people, not just the sages, but to everybody. Yosef ben Yochanan was a man of Jerusalem. Jerusalem had a lot of people, so there was a lot of traffic. People would come there for pilgrimages. So he said, let your house be open wide to all, so even the needy can come to it. And let the poor be members of your household, receive them hospitably. So he's from Jerusalem, that's why he's saying even the poor. Like everybody should come to your house, have an open home. And then he qualifies, even though you have a very open house, so tons of people, rich, poor, men, women. You have to have decorum, you have to have boundaries. So he says, don't speak excessively with a woman, right? Don't be chatty.
Why don't they say that with a man? Yeah.
Well, he's talking to the sages. So
It's a man's readiness, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's fair. It's fair. That's fair. But I think the point he's saying is that if the man owns the house, runs the house, and he's having all these guests, right? He has to be a host, or so he's going to talk to everybody. Don't be overly chatty with the women. That's not appropriate. And he says,
If a woman owned the house, don't be overly chatty with the man.
yeah,
Okay.
same thing. And he says, he goes even further saying this decorum, there's something this was added later. This isn't from him, this may be added later. But the point is this, even between one's wife, a person shouldn't be vulgar, overly demonstrative. It's not
No PDAs.
as excessive conversation, man and woman has a potential to extreme frivolity and to sexual tension that's not beneficial to building a spiritual household. And all the more so, be careful of the wife of another. Right? So again, it builds. Have your house open to sages, have it open to everybody, but have boundaries. And then there's some here, consequently, the saint just said on page 17, anytime one speaks excessively with a woman, he causes himself harm due to excessive intimacy that's liable to lead to sin or to altercation or strife, or to at the very least, it's idle from the matters of Torah, is going to come at the expense of his, spiritual growing, and ultimately inherits Gehenna, meaning purgatory, because you have harm for yourself, and you're also idle from words of Torah. This is not to be understood as someone should be not in love with their spouse. This is a matter of saying that it's a time and place, and there's also a structure of respect. It shouldn't be about self-serving, indulgent frivolity and stuff like that. Okay, moving along, Mishnah 6. Following the statements of the first prayer, Yosef ben Yezer and Ben Yochanan, the Mishnah says the second pair of transmission. Yoshua ben Prachia and Nitei Harabeli received from them. Quick note: this is Yoshua ben Prachia lived about 200 years before the destruction of the temple, under the reign of King Yanai, who had he wanted to wipe out all the Torah sages. He had to flee until his student Shimon ben Shatach, who was brother-in-law with the queen, said, it's safe for you to come back. Another small detail, this is very relevant. It tells us about a student he had who was going off the Jewish path. And basically he did something very inappropriate. So his teacher ostracized him. The student came back to repent a few times, and he wasn't accepted back. The final time he was going to be accepted, his teacher was saying the Shema, and he couldn't receive him. So the student said, "Oh, I'm done. He's totally ignoring me," and he left for good. And he made a heretical movement. It says he began to worship idols, and by practicing sorcery, convinced other Jews to follow in idolatrous ways. So, having knowing that background of what happened, his kind of harsh, pushing away his heretical student, you're going to see what his saying is. His saying said like this: "Yitrim practice the following. Aseh l'charav." So I'm adding to this: make yourself one primary teacher, because we just said you should have a house of many sages, right? But have one who's your primary rabbi, because if you have one, then you're loosey goosey. If you have 10 people you could ask from, you can learn from everybody. But you have to have one that's kind of your final arbiter of what's right for you. He said, have a friend that also together with you is trying to learn and advance and grow in ethics and spirituality. And the last thing he said, you have to take in mind what I just said, the story, judge every person in terms of his personality favorably, so that his shortcomings will not overshadow his positive characteristics. In his case, he wasn't so favorable to his student, and that led to his student cutting full ties and making a heretical movement. Some write it was Jesus of Nazareth, but the math doesn't add up because he lived much earlier than that. So it could have been there was another guy called Jesus who made a movement before the one that we know of, but whatever the case is. He said he regretted his not being favorable, and he actually went to seek out that student later to try to bring him back, who was heretical, and he tried to, even though the guy did the worst of sins. We'll see later in one of the later chapters that someone who convinces others to sin, it's very hard to repent for that because you cause so much, spiritual damage to other people, right? So, but the fact is, Shemar says there's still a chance he can repent. It might be very hard. So he says, I judge him now favorably that despite the unfortunate dissolution, he can come back. Okay, based on that, let's look at what his deputy Nasi said. Niti Harbeli said the following, page 19. Distance yourself from an evil neighbor. As we said earlier, you should have an open house, right? And you should judge everybody favorably. It doesn't mean you're chummy with someone who's not a good person. You could be cordial, you could be open. You don't have to be intimately friendly with them if they're going to be a bad influence.
What if that?
Russia, and don't become overly chummy to a wicked person, because in thinking that he's successful, so I'm gonna join him and get some the reward, and don't despair of divine punishment. Yes, question.
What if that person did something bad, but wasn't necessarily evil? What if they just?
That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking.
You're talking about bad,
Someone who's a
really bad.
mafia, or even if there's many ways you can look at someone who's sinful, but what he's saying is it's a safeguard of it's qualifying the statement. Open house, be very judging favorably, but do not be so open-minded that you're going to learn from everybody's negative behavior. Okay, Mishnah 8. Yehuda ben Taba and Shimon Shatach received from them. Shimon Prachya, so what did they say? Yehuda ben Taba said, do not render yourself. These teachings are more about to judges, so we're going to do this. Don't render yourself when you're adjudicating between two parties like a court advocate. Do not seek to represent, explain the positions of one of the parties. As in Jewish courts, there's no advocates, there's just witnesses and judges, ideally. Lawyers were not around then, When litigants, next page 22, when litigants stand before you, they should be wicked in your eyes, meaning be very suspicious, don't be very the justice is blind. Don't be all favorable and liberal now.
I'm trying to figure out.
The last one is when they depart from your presence, when they depart from your presence after they accept your verdict, everybody is innocent, because even if one guy was guilty, if he paid up, he's now innocent. They accept the verdict upon themselves. Moving along, Mishnah 9. Following the statement to be cautious about how to judge the litigants, his partner Shimon Shatach said the following: you shall interrogate the witnesses extensively, even beyond the basic questions, in order to precisely ascertain the matter and arrive at the true ruling. Meaning, be very, very exacting with the witnesses, and be careful with your statements so that the witnesses shouldn't learn to lie from them. There's a backstory. Shimon Shatach, I said, was the sister of the brother of the queen. Queen, I don't remember pronounce the name, Shalomit Alexandra. Salome Alexandra. Her husband was a wicked guy. Yanai, when he died, she took over. He became now the rabbinic rabbis had a very good. It was very good. It was a good time because they had now more political clout. So he made a lot of sweeping reforms. He banished a lot of. He killed a lot of witches and so on. Anyways, some not real ones. And then he eradicated the practice of witchcraft from the city of Ashkelon. So his some of the relatives of those sorceresses basically wanted to get back at him. So they got false witnesses to claim that his son violated something that's worthy of capital punishment. And the rule is, son was so he saw, and they even found out that it was a scam. But once the witnesses were proven true, you can't go back on it. And his son was killed. So he was very careful to interrogate witnesses. Next, Mishnah 10. Shemayin of, we should do, I guess, two more because there's so many good ones. Well, let's go quickly the rest of them. I won't give you the background. Next generation, Shemayin of Talion, they received from them. They said the following. Shmaya said, love labor. This is matters relating to areas of life that a person draw near and distance from as well. Love labor. Even if you're a great scholar, you're not below getting a manual labor job. Working is good for you. It's good for a Jew. It also helps settle the world. Usnas harbonis. Hate authority positions. You shouldn't look for authority positions because it's right. It's not good for your spiritual growth. Sometimes if you have to be the leader, but you're not doing it because you want to be in charge.
Aren't you kind of a rabbi as an authority figure, isn't it?
So here's it. Love the work aspect of it.
Okay.
Don't love the glory of it, the position of it. So love, that's another way of learning it. It doesn't mean love working. If you're a rabbi, love the malata, the work for the sake of the love of the game, the love of the work, but don't love it because of the glory you get from it, the power, right? And do not become overly friendly with the Gentile governmental authorities, as their motives are different from yours, and your well-being is not their priority. This is a side point. One word can be the key to understand the choice of word usage could be the key to understand what this is really saying. It didn't say you should, like, the government calls you, I'm not coming, I hate you. You got it, of course not, right? It means don't look, oh, now you're the rabbinic leader, you're the spiritual leader of the community, the president of the federation. Oh, now I'm going to hobnob with all the politicians. Don't be overly intimate. Don't go looking to socialize at their country club. You got to represent the community. You got to do that. You do that. You're not doing this as a social line, climbing the ladder. Okay, moving along, Mishnah 11. Following the statement of Shmaya, his partner of Talion. By the way, Shmaya of Talion were either converts or the sons of converts. And it's very powerful. So, and Avtalion is actually Aramaic for father of orphans because he was in charge of the orphanage. Avtalion. He said a thing, sages who engage in issuing rulings to the public and to their students, be careful with your statements, both in terms of their content and in terms of the form in which don't say things and that be misunderstood. Be very careful. You must do so, lest you incur liability to be exiled, spiritually and physically, and you'll be exiled to a place of bad water, to a place of society where evil influence prevails. And if you have students, your students will come after you, and they're going to drink the bad water. The name of heaven will be desecrated, as those students will misunderstand what you're saying, and eventually become, affected by the negative surroundings. Why was he saying that? So I didn't get a chance to look at this closely, but we saw the story of Antignos, who had these two students, Sadok and Baisus, who splintered up heretical movements that denied the oral Torah and just became purists of the biblical text and made their own sect. They misunderstood something. So you be very careful and don't say it's their problem. The teacher has to be very careful. He says that it should not be misunderstood, because if people make mistakes because you were unclear, that's on you. Next, Hillel and Shammai received from them. The next generation. Hillel, famous Hillel, and his counterpart Shammai. Hillel says, be among the disciples of Aaron, the priest who was both a guide and teacher of the multitudes and a paradigm of righteous person living in the midst of his people. As I quote, Rabbi Steinsaltz in his other book says, Aaron was the people's prophet. Moshe was God's, man, God's representative. Aaron was the people's prophet. He's the paradigm of a love and care for his the people. He would ohev shalom. He was one who loved peace. Peace. Aaron was always trying to make peace among people. V'rodav shalom. He'd pursue peace in a practical sense. Ohev sabrios. He would love people who are so low. They're just like creatures. They're like even the lowly people are just creature people. They're not like so. He generally loves people. Makarv the Torah, and he brings them close to the Torah. That is what Hillel would say. Why did Hillel say that? I didn't get a chance to look at that, but I'm going to finish up. Hillel would also say another thing about life, which was in Aramaic. He would say, Mishnah 13, one who glorifies his name, he would say, one who glorifies his name loses. If you look for fame, you're going to lose your name. You're going to lose your prestige. Because true glory stems from substantive matters rather than instant publicity and glory, which do not endure over time. He also said, one who does not increase in wisdom and character will lose it. The Rebbe always quote this, that Judaism is like a ladder, either going up or down. There's no such thing as just staying in where you are. The one who does not study is liable to be put to death. Meaning, if you don't enter the gateways of Torah study, that will substantively undermine your character as a Jew. His status is more severe than one who studies but discontinues his studies. And one who exploits the crown of Torah for his own, agenda will pass away from the world, because you're profaning the holy Torah for your own, lowly purposes. Famous line, Mishnah 14. Hillel will continue that you should take responsibility for actions and for your future and for your community. He would say, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? It may not needly mealy. It's incumbent upon a person to take action to ensure success. If the person acquires a matter without effort or personal involvement, then you're not really growing. On the other hand, if I'm only for myself, then what am I? A person must remember that he lacks the ability to act and succeed alone. You need the support of your environment. No one's a self-made man. There's always a community and environment that you're part of. Page 31. And if not now, then when? One must not wait with these matters and procrastinate. Every other time also be now. Mishnah 15, his counterpart Shammai said, make your Torah into a fixed matter. Make your Torah into a fixed matter. You have to have set times to study Torah. You can't just have time to play pickleball on Mondays and Wednesdays, but you have to have a set time to come to Torah class. It's not set. Shammai was very into. Quick background: Shammai and Hillel, their personalities and their style is very different. Shammai was extremely into definitions and boundaries, so it came off, of course, as harsh. He was idealistic. Hillel was more understanding, a little more understanding attitude. The famous story of a would-be convert came to Shammai and said, I want to convert, but on condition teaching the Torah on one foot. So Shammai took a yardstick and chased him away. He was a builder. He might have been an architect. He was very, you're making a mockery that you're reducing Torah into a 30-second sound clip. There's a structure and there's boundaries of Torah. He went to Hillel, and Hillel said, no problem. Went the whole Torah on one foot. Don't do to others like you don't want done unto you. The rest is commentary. Now go learn the commentary. You can understand the underlying, So, but Shammai said, fixed time for Torah study. He also said, say little and do much. And receive every person, regardless of actions, graciously. Maybe he learned... It says when you give charity, it's not as important as giving it with a kind face. Mishnah 16. From this point on, the Mishnah presents the statements of later sages, members of the dynasty of Hillel. So Hillel had a whole dynasty. He had a son, Rabban Gamliel, and he had a son, Rabbi Shimon, and he had a son, Rabbi Gamliel, and Hillel too, that were the leaders for many generations were from Hillel's family. So Rabbi Gamliel said the following. clear statements of how to do mitzvot. Aseh l'charav, establish yourself a teacher. We heard that earlier, right? Why do you say that again? So before it was about you shouldn't study yourself, you should study from a teacher. Here he's in a different meaning. Make a clear decision who you'll consult and ask questions of as a mentor. Before it's saying, Joe, have teachers or have a main teacher. But here we're saying, who's your life coach? Who's your mentor, your sensei? Okay. Avoid uncertainty. When you have a teacher, avoid uncertainty, because do mitzvahs in a clear way. For example, do not regularly tithe on the basis of estimates. When you give a tithe from your produce, don't be approximate. Weigh it, measure it, and give it. If you have charity, we give charity, we give a tithe. We give $100, give $10 to charity. We're up to $20, 20%. Mishnah 17. Shimon, his son, said the following: matters that address the virtue of silence over speech. Interesting. All my days I grew among the sages, said Rabbi Shimon, were about wisdom and reason, and nevertheless I found nothing for the body better than silence. Silence is preferable even to words of wisdom.
What's the Hebrew word for silence? Is it
Shtika. Okay. And he says the final thing is not study or rhetoric that is principle, the main thing, rather it is action. Anyone who speaks excessively engenders sin, because the more one speaks, the more difficult it to be cautious and precise, and it should be clean, kosher, meaningful speech. Mishnah 18, the last one. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, on the basis of three matters, the world stands. So we had this already. Here's another version. On justice, issuing rulings based on existing information. On truth, which is the guideline. It's not about a party, it's about truth. And on peace, which is the attempt to arrive at compromise beyond the letter of the law, as it's stated in Zechariah 8:16, administer truth and justice, peace in your gates. So what's the difference of the three pillars of the world that we have two versions? So let's see here in the Rebbe's so the world is sustained by Torah, worship, and deeds of kindness. But the society has to be seeking. That's more of like how God made the world. But what do you have to do when you run a society? Justice, truth, and peace.
So tomorrow will be justice, worship will be truth, and kindness will be peace.
I'm trying to see.
That makes sense.
Or the world was created for the sake of Torah.
Community.
I'm sorry?
So one's the world and one's a community.
I think so. In the Steinsaltz on page 36 in the bottom, those are the spiritual foundations. Here we're talking about society, yes. According to some versions, Shimon Tzaddik was in the times of the temple. And Shimon ben Gamliel is saying the three pillars after destruction.
Mm-hmm.
That even though there's no temple service, the world's existence is still merit of these three matters. Yeah, so he says action would be justice, intellect would be with truth, and character with peace. So here, another commentary says, the Rambam says, action, we say here, intellect, the value is truth and intellect, and character is peace.
But then where does Torah, knowledge, justice?
How do they stack up?
Yeah.
Kindness.
Looking it up here.
I mean, kindness.
So, to me, the first one's like has more to do with individual
Yeah.
conduct,
Yeah, that's
study Torah, serve God, and act kindly.
It's more for the society.
And there's.
Yeah.
Right.
Individual, yeah.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, that's what it seems like.
But you mentioned intellect,
I'm looking at here. It's in
it's like Ramban.
the Rambam's on the note, the bottom of 36. He quotes in the bottom of the first column.
Oh, right.
The Rambam explains that these three matters refers to appropriate conduct of a person of the world. I don't know if it's stacking it up.
Yeah.
Torah, avoda. Avoda is action, do with justice. Torah is intellect, truth. Gemilut chasadim, do with peace. I guess that's the way I would do it. All right, we crammed a ton of information.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, we have to end with so we have to end with another add-on that is at the end of every in the Siddur of Bishanan ben Akasha. This mission is not part of a vote, it's actually from another tractate, Makot, and it's customary recited to studying Torah of the group. Bishanan ben Akasha, Bishanan the son of Akasha would say, God wanted to make Israel meritorious. Therefore, he gave us he heaped upon us Torah mitzvahs. As it says, Hashem desired due to his righteousness to broaden Torah and make it glorious. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed it. So we'll try to keep it more to an hour next week.
Thank you.
7:30 to 8:30.
Thank you
Be
so
well.
much.
Thank you, Rabbi.